So, good morning, everybody, and welcome to our third webinar in the series, Building Your Online Teaching Toolbox. Today, we're very fortunate to have with us one of Southern's faculty experts on using technology to enhance teaching and learning. Dr. Candy Wang is from the chemistry department, and she's going to discuss implementing rubrics on Blackboard. So thank you so much for joining us, and Candy, please take it away.
Thanks. Thank you, Bo and Trevor, for inviting me. I'm really excited to talk about this topic because once you get comfortable with learning how to use rubrics, it will save you so much time. It'll take away from the mental strain of remembering how many points did I take away or add when a student does this or that. And then also there's this valuable assessment tool that can be processed at the end. So let's go ahead and get started. Let me go to my next slide. Why are you not working? Okay. All right. So in today's webinar, we're going to cover first and foremost, what are rubrics and why are they useful? We're going to look into okay, how do I make a rubric? You can make it from scratch. You can modify an existing rubric, or you can import a rubric. So if some of your colleagues use a rubric and you teach the same course, there's an easy way to export rubrics so you can import them in. We're going to look into how do you affiliate rubrics with assignments on Blackboard, then how to grade using rubrics. And I'll show you in real time what it looks like when it shows up after a student has submitted a report. And then lastly, how do you use rubrics to generate data, reports, assess trends, look at any gaps and student learning outcomes that need to be addressed. So why do we want to incorporate rubrics? Well, rubrics are a systematic tool. They enable consistency across a fixed set of criteria, and we'll look at a few examples in a second. It's an evaluation tool. It has an explicit set of learning expectations and guidelines. For students, they really like it because it provides clear guidelines on what you expect from a homework assignment, regular assignments, exams, and term papers. And for you, it saves time calculating scores and providing built-in feedback. You don't have to write the same comment over and over again, on formatting, spelling errors, et cetera, et cetera. It's all built in because it's described within the rubric. And the last thing that's really cool is it aggregates those data. So where can we find rubrics on Blackboard? So this is just a screenshot of my Blackboard page. If you click under course tools, go all the way down, you'll see rubrics are right here. Okay. And so just to give a primer on this presentation, I've taken a lot of screenshots to try and help you navigate how to find these things on your own time and after the presentation. But I'm also going to, at one point during this presentation, exit the PowerPoint and go through my Blackboard as well so you can see in real time where these things are. So Bo has graciously recorded this webinar so that you can go back and see if I'm going too quickly or if you have questions, you can go back to this video and see. Okay, so once we click on rubrics, we get to this landing page. Okay, and so there are a few different ways that we can make, import, or modify our rubrics. So the first thing we could do is we can create a rubric from scratch. So you just click on create rubric here. The second thing, we could import a rubric, and I'm happy also to export a rubric, both if it can be affiliated with the link, so people can just use it and modify it as they see fit. Or, the thing about rubrics is you can really make it your own. There's a lot, but if you would want an example, I'd be more than happy to export a generic rubric that I use. And then the last thing is once you've already made a rubric and you want to build something similar, you can just copy it. So you can go to this, there's a gray arrow here that's hidden right now, but you can click on that, go to copy, it'll make a copy of that rubric, and then you can rename and edit it so that you can easily make more rubrics that you need. So this is what pops up when you press new rubric. So everything can be adjustable. So the standard thing that shows up for these rubrics is these levels of achievement: novice, competent, proficient. Here are some criteria. Again, this is all very generic and preset. And so you can change the rubric type. So if you want to do points instead of percent, you can change it here. You can change all of these names. So I've modified some of these names as well. You'll see in other examples, you can put it as like perfect, or different levels of achievement that you want, or descriptions. Again, the criteria you can also change. Sometimes I put question 1, question 2, question 3 for like easy grading of homework, instead of like this rubric style. I use it to just do easy calculations for me. And then you can see the total points or the total weight here. Again, you can add as many rows or columns, or simplify as many rows or columns as you want. You can have a 2x2 rubric grid. And then within these blocks, this is where you can write descriptions of like what students need in order to fit into this category. So like they've achieved all of the necessary metrics. Maybe they're missing 1 or 2 metrics. Maybe they're missing more than half, or like this whole section is missing, something like that. So again, here are just highlights of what to pay attention to. There's lots of different things that you can do to make it your own. So here's an example of one that we do for lab reports. So in chemistry, our students do experiments and they write up their findings in this very formalized lab report. And so notice that I took some of the novice, proficient, and competent, and then I added like another category of advanced beginner. So again, you can break it down however you want to. I added this column because I thought there was like a really big gap between 0 and 10, and like 0, 5, and 10 seemed a little extreme. So having another metric here made me more comfortable in grading. So you can see I did it by points. So you can see my breakdown. You can do whatever you want. As you can see, it's not like a distinct division of like, okay, we have 20 points. Each one is like 5 points per category. It can be whatever you want it to be. And then you can see all the descriptions of, so students know like, okay, this is why I didn't receive the full point. They must have been missing this or that. And then notice I've also changed the criteria. And this is really easy. You just click on the gray box here and you can just edit the title. You can also make simple rubrics. I've alluded to this before. So sometimes during the summer, we have post-op questions, which are like basically, did they answer the question correctly or not? And so you could do something like, oh, they did it correctly, or they didn't do it correctly, or like maybe they got half of the question right and half wrong. And so you could do something as simple as this, where it makes grading really easy, because again, you'll see later, the rubrics auto-tabulate the scores. And so you don't have to write comments. You don't have to write like 2 out of 2 points or 0 out of 2 points. It does it all for you. And notice there are no descriptions here. It's just like 0 points, 1 point, etc. So I'm just showing you the broad range of rubrics. And then I'll show you this in real time as well, but how do you affiliate rubrics to assignments? So yay, you've done the first step. You've made a rubric that you really want to deploy. Now what? We need to add it to our assignment. So you already have assignments in Blackboard. Once you go to your assignment of interest, you left click edit, and then you scroll down and you get to this grading part, which I'm sure many of you have seen. There are points possible. And then there's this area where you can associate your rubric with whatever you're interested in. So if you click on add rubric, you can select one of the rubrics that you've made. You can create a new one, or you can create from an existing. So I usually click select rubric. And then there's some other parameters. And you can troubleshoot this with your students as well. But there are ways where if you don't want to show students rubrics, you can change that parameter. You can also have them see it with the scores or without the scores. I tend to just show them everything because for students, it really helps to see like not just the score they got, but like what they missed and what they didn't miss, et cetera, et cetera. And there's this one caveat: if the points don't match the rubric, Blackboard will ping you being like, oh, what do you want the maximum points to be? Because your rubric has a total of this many points, but the total points are such and such. So it'll find a way to try and like merge those two together so it flows, so it makes sense logically. So now that we've gone through a little bit of Blackboard, of rubrics, why they're useful and how we deploy them, let's see all the steps on Blackboard. Okay, and then I'll show you what it looks like in grading real time. Okay, so let me exit. Okay, cool. All right, so so this is one of my courses that I wanted to show you. You guys can still see my screen? Yeah, okay. So again, if you go under course tools, you go down to rubrics. Okay, so this is where if I create a rubric, it goes to this new page where you can name your rubric and then describe it. You don't really have to describe it if you don't want to. And then again, here are the different parameters. And so I want to change it to points. I usually like working in a point system. You know, you can delete columns or edit it. So maybe I want to delete this column and only have like a 2x2. Okay, so delete this row. You can add rows, you know, and it'll just show up. And you can call this calculations or something. Like in chemistry, we do calculations all the time. Okay, so notice that when I changed it to points, they all went to 0. So, you know, I could do 2 points, 2 points. And what's great is notice that it'll tally up all the points. So you can see, okay, this makes sense. There's sometimes where I'm making a rubric where, you know, when I'm changing something, I accidentally don't distribute the points correctly. And so you can see it here. The total points will be in the highest level. And you can always adjust your rubric before you start grading. And then once you start grading, you can no longer change your rubric, which I'll show you in a second. But if you clear those grades from the grade center, then you can go back and change the rubric. So I'll show you that as well. So these are ways that we can modify. You can also, another thing we like to do is maybe you want calculations to be first, you know, or maybe you want this to be first. So you can reorganize all your criteria in a way that, you know, makes sense to you, and really just make it your own. Okay, so that is creating your own. Importing, you basically just need a Blackboard rubric already. So, and there could be some rubrics from the literature that have been converted to an LMS or an LMS is basically like Blackboard or Canvas or any of these learning management software services. So it's possible that they have one that's in a Blackboard format, and so you can export, but the easiest way is to get something exported from a faculty member. And again, I'd be happy to export an example so you can just import it. What I traditionally do is notice that I have strategic rubrics for all these different labs. So the way I made it is I made the first one and then I copied it, and so then it shows up as copy of lab 1. You can edit it, rename it, and then you'll see it's an exact duplicate. And so this is where, you know, if the rubric is tailored specifically for an assignment, I can go in and change it so that it's relevant to the new rubric that I want to make. So that's where you can see. Sorry, is there a question? Let me check.
Yeah, the question was, can you import Excel files?
No, it's just, but we can export rubric data as an Excel file. But when you're importing, I think it has to be in a Blackboard format. I haven't tried with an Excel, but I have a feeling that because there are like specific parameters within the rubric that are beyond an Excel, that it might not work, you know, like it has these details like level of achievement, and I'm not sure how you would capture that in an Excel format. Yeah, so basically you want something in a Blackboard or LMS format. Yeah, but I'm not 100% sure that you can't. Okay, so those are the 3 ways that you can modify rubrics or add them or etc. So then now that I have a rubric in place, let me show you how we go through an assignment. So let me move this. Okay, so here we have our assignments. My students have to submit this lab report. And so I made a rubric and now I want to attach it to my assignment. So we scroll down after due date. And here, this is where you can select a rubric. And so all of your rubrics pop up. You can, you know, select this one, submit. And then it's here twice because, so this is what normally happens. It says, you know, it's not exposed to students. So you can say yes with rubric scores, yes without rubric scores, or after grading. There are lots of different options that you can choose, or you can just select no. If you, some faculty members don't like showing rubrics because they feel like then it influences student learning to just comply with the rubric rather than the whole learning enterprise of like the lab report or something like that. So some of them don't like to give that information, but some, I am a proponent of like showing students how we assess them and like what they need. So it's totally up to you what you want to do. And then you could say use for grading, and this is where you can see your rubric and you can make any changes. So exit that. So this is how you add it. And then once you do that, then it's all set in place. Okay. All right. So now that we know how to affiliate our rubrics with assignments, I want to show you what grading a rubric looks like when something has been submitted. Okay, so this is a different lab report from the same class. Oh, this page is not being responsive. Okay. Weird, it's not. Oh, okay. All right, let me try then just reloading this page. Okay. All right, and then I'm gonna scroll down. Okay. So here are in the Grade Center, you can grade anonymously, which is a different thing that you can do. But this is a student's lab report that they submitted. And so I'm not sure if you saw what I just did, but the rubric, when you first have a grade, when you're in the Grade Center and you're grading, there's this tiny little arrow. And so you want to click on that. And then you'll see grade by rubric. And so you'll see lab 4. So you can click on that as well. And so then you'll see, okay, this is how you can start grading students. And what's really awesome about this is you can see everything. You can see show description and show feedback. So you're reminded of like, okay, what are the parameters that I had set for this rubric? And then once you get comfortable and you've graded a few papers and you're like, I know all the metrics, you can hide it. So it's, a more condensed version. But for now, I want to show you everything. So here I'm grading students on like their data and results processing, it's 55 points. So, you can click, oh, there are minor errors with the data, errors with the graph. And so in an effort, this is how it saves you time. You don't have to write this. If you see common errors that are happening with your student assignments or reports or homework, like you don't have to continuously write the same comment over and over again. I started using rubrics because I realized I was writing the exact same sentence of don't write in the first person, don't talk about feelings, like, stick to the science, different, but the same I just felt like I was repeating myself over and over again. So I was like, oh, maybe I'll just make a rubric that shows the consistency, and it does save you time. And then, if there's like additional feedback you want to provide, this is where you can put it, and they know that it's specifically about the data and results. So I wrote, oh, graphs need to have these labels, and it needs to have this, you can write comments that are related to it. So you can see, I answered, or I provided feedback on various parts. And then this is really important. So notice that there's only 2 parameters. There's like a 10 or 5-point gap between things. If students like maybe, you want to give them another point or take away another point because they did something super minor, I realize that you are working in like a strict like 10, 5-point, 11-point range, so something that you can do that is really helpful is this gives you a raw total, and then you can actually change it. If you are like, okay, the raw total is 85, but really they deserve 90 points out of 100 instead, because like they shouldn't have lost that many points. I usually make a note of that to students, being like -1 point, or like letting them know, okay, in this section, you actually lost a total of like 30 points or whatever, instead of like the 25 that it was set. And then you can correct it here, and that'll adjust it. You save the rubric. You can provide overall feedback on the assignment, save it. It will translate to this score up here. And then you're done. You just press submit and that's it. So that is rubric grading. I think we can continue with the presentation. Is there any other questions? Okay. So then what's really exciting about rubrics, besides the fact that you're creating this consistency across grading, you can use anonymous grading, you can really take out like the bias, you can take out a lot of the implicit biases that you might subconsciously or consciously have. Then you can see data. So once you've graded a bunch of reports or things like that, then you can see, oh, how are students performing? Another place where this is really interesting is in our chemistry courses. Usually we have around 64 students per section in a lecture, but then labs can only accommodate like 12 to 16 students. So students are in different labs with different instructors. So even though they have the same lecturer, they have different adjunct professors running the lab. And so one thing you can also see is, okay, is there uniformity among like different adjuncts grading, and a lot of students have cited like, oh, I feel like this is not fair. I feel like this adjunct grades harder than this adjunct. And so you can use data to make informed decisions about how the grading is taking place, and like if what those averages compared over those set criteria that you've made. So how do we look at, how do we find these data? So with your lab, with your rubrics, you click on this gray arrow, and there's this title called View Associated Content. And so you click on that. Okay. And then once you click on that, then you get to this site where it says View All Items. And so if you're using the same rubric for many, many different homework assignments, all of those assignments will pop up. They'll pop up based on like how you've affiliated them. And so it's possible for a rubric that you have multiple item names. And for me, it's only 1 and 1. Like I affiliated my rubrics to correspond with a specific lab report. So again, that gray arrow is missing, but you click on that gray arrow, you press rubric evaluation report, and then it will pop up with a PDF of statistics, or actually you can also have an Excel, which I'll show you how to do this as well. But this is a rubric statistics report. I think it's really exciting. So the red shows you the possible total number of points. The blue shows you the actual student performance. And you can see, okay, so in this case, like students are doing pretty well on data and results. They're doing okay on calculations. There's like a slight decline. And then with post-lab questions, there's a 7-point difference. So maybe there needs to be more work here. The gap between what's possible and actual, this is an area where I could improve on like what's going on here. Are students misunderstanding some learning outcomes? Can I spend extra time to help them with post-lab questions, etc.? So let me show you how we do that as well. Okay, that's it. All right, so let me go to, so we were just here, but let me show you again how we got there. So if we go to Course Tools, Rubrics, I'm going to go to Lab 5 Informal, View Associated Content. Then once I'm here, I'm going to again click on that gray arrow, Rubric Evaluation Report. So this is where I can pick the kind of report that I want. You can get it in HTML, Excel, or Word, which is really exciting. I haven't tried to export in these parameters, but I feel like for any research or data on assessment and how students are doing with one intervention versus another, you can download these data and then, make graphs showing like, oh, this is the performance in one versus the other, and they're statistically significant. So I usually like to export as PDF. And then these are arbitrary dates, and I don't typically change them, but again, you can modify them. Like if you want to look at one semester or 1 year versus another year, you can do that as well. So then you press submit. And so it'll process. It takes about 30 seconds, not too long. And then it'll pop up with another window where you can see your report. Okay, so this went off screen, but I had this report come in. So it provides you this PDF. It tells you, okay, here's what the instrument name is, here's what the rubric is. There are 17 students that were evaluated, and like, here's a time frame. So one of the first things is like, okay, how did students perform overall, right? So if the total possible points are 100, they're averaging around 85, which is not bad. And it's interesting of itself. So then we see a breakdown of data and results, post-lab questions, and a different row. I don't know what that is, but my rubric probably needs some modification or edits. So you can see like differences between how students are doing. I feel like this might be graphs, how they're graphing stuff. And then the last thing is, so you see that as a bar graph, you can also get a frequency distribution. So, most students are in the proficient range, or like for post-lab questions, most students are in the competent range. And then same with this row, which is probably graphs, like they are missing something here. So, what is it about these two sections where we could improve student learning outcomes by clarifying or paying particular emphasis to like, oh, students typically struggle in this area. Maybe we can spend a little bit more time on this. It also gives you the average, the median, and the standard deviation, which is really useful. Okay, that is primarily it for, and then you can save them, download different reports, run new reports, but you can do this for every single rubric, for every single course that you like or want. Let me resume our PowerPoint. So those are the basic tenets of implementing a rubric. It's not that challenging. There are a lot of like different things that you can do, and that's and so sometimes that might make it challenging because you're like, what's the best way to do it? What's the easiest? So I think like importing something that's already been made and modifying it is the easiest way. There's a good chance that you'll make some mistakes because there's so many ways that you can modify something. Like you saw in my report, like I had row 3 instead of like a descriptive title for criteria. So that happens, and you can always make changes. But apart from the lead time it takes to incorporate rubrics upfront, you'll have to do it before the assignments are due and before grading has been done. it will save you hours of time. Like it's so easy to just click on like aspects of the rubric and then just have it total the grade for you. And it helps you grade consistently, that I found. So I told you that there's a chance where if you've already graded something, you can't modify the rubric. So you'll have a message that looks like this. This rubric has been used for grading and content cannot be modified. And so if that's the case, and this has happened to me before where I've graded a student's lab report and then I go on to the next student and I'm like, oh, I accidentally assigned 25 points here and then 30 points here, that doesn't make sense. Instead of like changing that when I was modifying a rubric. So what you have to do, and you'll learn your mistakes early in the beginning, is you can just note the grades of the students that you've already done. You need to just clear their grade attempts, just clear the score. And what that means is just, let me show you in here. So what that basically means is you just press delete and then submit. So you clear the last attempt. And when you do that for all of them, then it'll let you modify that rubric again. So that's just a small hiccup, but it makes sense. I mean, like once you start grading, you shouldn't be able to change the rubric. It must be consistent for like the students across the board. So that's just one small hiccup that you might encounter, and then you can change it and work around it. But yeah, I've been using rubrics for the past 2.5 years, and I mean, I've been trying to incorporate it in every single class through all aspects of learning, including like homeworks. Like it's just so easy to just write like, yes, no, they have this, and for grading. So I'd be happy to take any questions, or if you want me to go through rubrics again, like how to implement them, because I know sometimes they just go quickly. I'd be happy to do so. Thank you for your time.
Well, I appreciate it because I had a lot of faculty had problem with rubrics, and so it's fantastic. Thank you.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, this is really great. Thank you so much. I have a question. So
Yeah.
do you have different instances when you show the rubric to students before or after, or not show it at all, or is it you just pick one method and you kind of stick to it for every assignment that you have with rubrics? So you see what I'm saying? Because you mentioned in the beginning that you can show the rubric to students before they start the assignment. You can show it only after they submit the assignment, or you can just hide it, right?
Yeah. So I think you could definitely use that paradigm where they don't see the rubric and then after you grade, they see the rubric. But I usually show it to students beforehand, and actually most of them don't even know to look for it.
Okay.
So yeah, we can also look at that. Like I didn't even do that as a student preview. So you can see what students see. So let's do that really fast, which is a really good point, actually. So, because also that avoids another question. Like, so one of the pitfalls, but joys of being a professor is like you're inundated with the same question over and over again. So another reason I started doing rubrics and showing students is because I'd get questions on like, what do we need to do? Like, I want to make sure I check like every single box on like lab reports and all this stuff. And so having the rubrics ahead of time, I'm like, oh, focus on these parameters or like these assessment or these calculations. And so I found that to be really helpful. Okay, so when they look at their assignment, they see, okay, it's due here. This is what's possible. And then let's see, let me go to lab 2. Sometimes they can see it and sometimes not. Oh yeah, so right here it says view rubric. So a lot of students don't even know to go there. So then they view the rubric and it again pops up as this window. And so you can preview what your students are seeing. So again, I went into student preview mode. I went to their assignment, and then under the points possible, there's this tiny little thing that says view rubric. So of course, a lot of students don't even know to go see the rubric. So it ends up working out that you could use either paradigm and it ends up being the same almost. I think only like a small percentage of students actually look at the rubric before they submit a report.
That's great. And then they see it under my grades, right? When they see
I
their
believe
grades,
so.
they can.
Yeah.
the
So
rubric.
let's see.
Hmm.
Oops. Yeah, I think when they go to view rubric, then they can see, okay, these are the points and it's highlighted. You can see view rubric. View rubric. Yeah, I can't believe I totally missed this and I'm so glad you asked. Like, it's always valuable to see like, what do the students see on Blackboard versus
Oh,
like
yeah.
what you see. Yeah, yeah. So this way you can guide them being like, okay, this is where you can see not only your score will show up here, but then you can see like what exactly you missed or need to work on or did well on, etc.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are there any other questions? So, I will ask you if you don't mind to share one of your rubrics and I will
Yeah.
post it up online and I'll post a recording. I'd like to thank everybody who came and I'd really like to thank you for taking the time and doing this. This is really quite useful and I actually don't necessarily like the rubrics, but after watching this presentation, I'm reconsidering what I could do with my course. So I'm looking forward to playing around with rubrics again. So thank you so much.
Yeah, of course. Happy to be of help.
Thank you.
Wow.